Hello and welcome, fellow bookworms and film fans. Welcome to this week's episode of The Contented Narrative, and we shall be looking at Gone Girl. Now, Gone Girl was written by Gillian Flynn and it was published in 2012. It was then released in film in 2014. Now, as usual, I will be looking at four things. I'll be looking at the plot, I'll be looking at how good the film is, how good the book is, and of course, overall, how well the book has taken, well, how well the film has taken from the book even. Now, do bear in mind that there are spoilers as I do discuss the book and the film in its entirety. So the first thing that we start with is the plot. Now, it sort of starts the same way, with Nick waking up on his and Amy's 5-year anniversary, but rather than them spending the morning with her, he decides that he's going to go to the bar that he co-owns with his sister Margot. Now, bear in mind as well, this is a 5-year wedding anniversary, but I feel like, you know, you find out later that Amy was kind of pushing him to leave the house. You find out why. She'd be twisted. In the book, though, you do get a little bit more background of how they ended up in Missouri, whereas in the film, it's practically straight away she's there. In both, however, you do get the diary entry from Amy of how they met at a party. So it's sort of like the whole boy meets girl at party. In the book, however, they then don't see each other for another good couple of months. In the film, it's almost like as soon as they've met each other, they're inundated with each other and they're with each other forever and always, till death do us part or whatever. So in the book, you get the feeling that the past treasure hunts didn't go nearly as well as you think they would. So Amy, for every anniversary, will create clues that Nick has to follow, and it's clues of how their relationship went and what was in their relationship and what's important to herself. However, what's important to one person isn't necessarily what's important to another person. And you see this as in the book, Nick doesn't really get that many clues right. In the film, you're led to believe that at the beginning, he gets every single clue, every single treasure hunt. It's not until later that you find out that actually he's falling behind and unable to do it, or just doesn't want to do it. Either way, I mean, it sounds like a lot of work for an anniversary present. Me and Michael just wrap ours and then open it up on the day. So in both, you have the fact that Nick is at the bar and then he gets a call from a neighbour saying that something's not right, your cat's outdoors, your door's wide open. So Nick comes running back and sees the scene and goes, oh, something's not right here, calls the police because he can't get hold of Amy. So let's have a look. So in the book, we go back to the diary, and as I said before, Nick and Amy haven't seen each other since the party, but they end up getting back together for a bit. But then we do see Amy and her alter ego, Amazing Amy, getting married. Now in the book, you know, Amazing Amy, the book series, she's getting married, and Amy is sort of like pushed into this feeling that her life doesn't quite match up to Amazing Amy's. However, in the film, that's when Nick proposes to Amy, is at the Amazing Amy wedding launch, as it were, which I thought was kind of cute and romantic. In the book, I think he proposes, oh, I've completely forgotten, my mind's drawn a blank. I think he proposes when they sort of like go out and on like a little beach house and stuff, and he proposes there, which is still really romantic. So in both, it does go back to Nick on the day off. So you do get the narrative style very much the same in the book and in the film. You've got day of, you've got the diary entries, and then later on you've got Amy's perspective from the day that she disappeared all the way through to when she comes back to Nick. Now, in both narratives, it is moving in and out of before and after the disappearance. In the book, you get the diary entries a lot more often than you do in the film. But again, you can't have everything from the book to the film, so that's completely understandable. So in both, Nick goes back onto the day off. He calls the police. In the film, it's just a detective and a police officer, and they start looking around. In the book, it's two detectives that sort of take on the case, as it were. But you get a feel from the happiness from the diary entries, and then it sort of starts turning sour as it goes on, which, as you learn, is fabricated completely. The earlier entries are not fabricated. That's one thing that she does point out. But you get this whole, you get the build up, you get Nick being taken to the police station, you get the, you know, just for routine questioning, you get amazing Amy's parents flying in, you get search parties, you get questioning. You also find out that Nick's having an affair as well with one of his students. You get the whole treasure hunt thing is going on as it normally would, but obviously in the film they let him do the treasure hunt. In the book they're a little bit more wary of letting him do the treasure hunt because obviously they think he's going to tamper with something, which he might not, but you get sort of all that. Now in the book it is a slow build up to Amy missing. It's more of a sort of like, they're not taking it seriously quite yet. They will eventually, but at the moment it's sort of, you know, she could have gone off with her friend, she could have done this, she could have done the other. In the film, almost straight away it's like, right, I'm spotting that blood there, I've done a bleach test and that's all wiped up blood and this isn't right, and they start the search quite quickly. So you also get the flaws from Nick as well. So you see that in the book and in the film. He's constantly like, he's cheating on his wife with a student, you know, he doesn't quite know how to act around people, and you see that at the press conference, in the press conference when he smiles because someone's just like, you know, smile Nick, and he does because he wants to be the people pleaser, and unfortunately that does not work in his favour in this book. So we get the first clue in the police station for a bit in a big box. In the film, as I said, they've already given him the first clue, he's figured it out, he's gone to the second clue, and so on and so forth. But they look at the clues with a lot more conviction than you would with anything else, because these are the final moments of Amy, as it were, because they're now working on the presumption that she may be missing. But then we get a list of her stalkers, again fabricated. So we're saying stalkers. So I say in brackets because we find out later that the truth is sometimes different from who's remembering it. So we've got Amy, you know, giving Nick this whole list of stalkers of people that are obsessed with her and can't do this and can't do that. Later we find out that actually she becomes very possessive and she ends up sort of pushing them to a point and then realising that actually she doesn't want them anymore. And so she's got it in her mind that they will always want her, but they don't. Some move on with their lives. Desi does not. He's a bit of a weird one, but we'll find that out later. So you've got this whole the whole search is sort of the same. The lead up is the same. The diary entries are sort of the same. You sort of get this falling apart. Admittedly, the clues do lead to different places in the book than they do in the film, which is slightly different. Now, the mall scene is revised, so it's got Boney and Gilpin. I mean, it's pretty faithful to the book, as it were, because you've got the two guys reciting the Gettysburg Address and plenty of drug users moving in and out of the thing. Because you find out later that Amy went to buy a gun in the mall because she was scared of her husband. All a ploy. I'm just saying that now. So, however, in the book it is Nick and his dad, so you do get a lot more of the dad in the book than you do in the film. So they take baseball bats and they go into the empty mall and they find out all the information. In the film, it's you find out from the police that Amy was looking to purchase a gun, and you don't find out why. And well, we find out why, but he doesn't find out why. So as well, many of the fights that Nick and Amy have in the diary entries are quite different. For instance, there's no fight over packing a mattress when they move to Missouri. You get that in great detail in the book, but you don't really get that in the film. Additionally, the movie Amy's Diary points, Nick has huge spending habits when he purchases a laptop and a TV after he loses his job. And this makes the spending more credible later on. You don't really see that as much in the book as you do in the film. Now, as I said about the anniversary treasury hunt, you find that one bit is completely missing in the anniversary treasury hunt from the film. So it's completely missing from the film. And this is Nick's trip to Hannibal, Missouri. So it's Mark Twain's birthplace. A little bit of information there for you. So it's a place that Nick has taken both Amy and his mistress. So in the book, you feel like Amy is going through the places where he's been with his mistress. In the film, it's just a way of taking him through memory lane, as it were, to really stab him at the back. So later, so then Nick obviously finds a letter from Amy in which she showers him with compliments and brings up fond memories. He knows this isn't quite true, but he can't really say anything. And then later, the police do find Amy's purse there in the book, which is casting more doubt onto Nick's innocence and the disappearance. In the film, it's just little things like the splattered blood pool and his whereabouts are quite unknown and things like that that sort of start giving them the idea that something's going wrong. So for the movie, Gillian Flynn did cut out all the stuff about Amy pretending to be grossed out by blood and needles, which I'm kind of glad. I'm grossed out by blood and needles. Well, needles, not blood so much. So instead of just cutting her arm and letting it pool all over the kitchen floor like she does in the book, Amy drains her blood with an IV and then she uses it to set up her crime scene, which is a lot more vindictive in my eyes, using an IV to drain blood to then pour over the kitchen floor to then clean up completely, rather than just cutting your arm open and letting some blood go on the floor. So you've got Amy's crazy antics as well. So it goes on a lot longer, as I said, in the book than it does in the film. In the book, it starts off way, like in primary school, secondary school, when she pushes a girl down a flight of, when she throws herself down a flight of stairs and blames a girl. In the film, it sort of doesn't quite show up as early as it normally would. But you can't have everything, so that's completely understandable. So the guy who got framed for rape as well speaks out. And we also learn a bit more about Desi's past with Amy as well in the books than we do in the film. In the film, we see it one-sided, sort of like a couple of lines thrown away here and there about Desi the stalker. In the book, you get a lot more history about what's going on with their lives. And as I said, you've got another girl that Amy frames as a stalker. She's a lovely girl, is Amy. Really should see a therapist. So the sort of important scene in the book where a young blogger named Rebecca interviews Nick is completely missing in the film. And this is where he records that he loves and misses Amy as a way to sway public opinion back to his favour. This wasn't in the film. In the film, he sort of then goes on to a talk show to talk out about the fact that, he was in a relationship with somebody else, but he gets beaten to the punch by the person he's in a relationship with because they speak out first. So you can see kind of like Amy has done it brilliantly, framing him for murder. And she's an absolute genius. She runs away just as she does. She dyes her hair, eats loads of junk food to put on weight. If only losing weight was as quick as putting on weight. So you see that both in the film and the book, that she has thought of every eventuality, and she has really thought it through. The fact that she makes friends with the pregnant ladies, that she can steal the urine from the toilet to say that she's pregnant, so that she then frames him for this big argument where he doesn't want kids and she does, and then suddenly it's his pregnant wife is missing. She's brilliant. She is brilliant. She's psychotic, but she's brilliant. So you've got all of that sort of like differences and similarities there, but you also got the one thing that I do get a little bit upset about is there are some real women that are missing in the movie. So Desi's mother, who always goes to bat for him, is completely missing. You never see Tanner Bolt's wife, and Tanner Bolt is who ends up representing Nick. You never see her, which is a shame because she was quite integral in the book, as she's sort of like pushing Tanner Bolt to, think of different eventualities. And at one point, she probably does think Nick did it. A lot of people probably did. And Hilary Handy, who's the girl that we spoke about earlier, who supposedly pushed Amy down the stairs. So they're all missing in action. And I find that you could have done with a few more female interpretations within the film rather than Go, who's Nick's twin sister, because then it gives the thought of like, what is the public thinking? Because yes, the public is thinking Nick probably did it, but what are the women close to him thinking? Did he do it? Did he not? So another thing that sort of is a little bit different, but kind of the same, is Amy's plan does go awry when she's playing mini golf with these two people that she's found, like that she's sort of made friends with, as it were. because she drops her money bag. And when she drops her money bag, they realise that she is like, she's got quite a bit of money there. She's hiding something. So they then come back and they rob her. So that is completely the same in the film and the book. The only thing difference in the book is she's a lot more careless with the money, first of all. So you could see her pulling out cash to pay debts and everything like that. Whereas in the film, she seems more sort of like counting every dollar, as it were, to see how long it would last her. But she does get robbed. And because she gets robbed, that kind of throws a kink in her plan. Now, her plan was to kill herself, and then she's completely framed Nick. And then she realises, why am I killing myself? I'm going to live. I'm going to live and I'm going to see Nick rot in hell, basically. So she was preparing herself to live then. And then the whole kink gets thrown in because she's been robbed. So who does she turn to? She turns to Desi, our lovely little stalker friend who's not actually a stalker. Now, one thing that kind of does annoy me a little bit is Nick never tries to explain to the detectives how Amy is framing him. You see this, he knows it, he figures it out, but in the film he never tries to really explain it. In the book, Tanner Bolt always explains Nick's side, but in the movie they just keep their mouth shut. And I feel like obviously that's probably a little bit more integral to the fact that they don't really believe, they wouldn't believe him really if he started saying all these elaborate things. But obviously, you would be like, this isn't real. Can you not see that she's playing it? So Tanner Bolt comes to bat for him in the book and talks to the police, but they never really discuss that in the film. So despite this, the detective still thinks that there's something off with the disappearance as a whole. In the book, figures it out a lot quicker than it does in the film. In the film, I think she starts to figure it out sort of like once Amy has come back. And she starts to try and figure things out and realise that something's not right. In the book, she's kind of starting to get an idea of it. I say she. Yeah, it's she. It's mainly because of Nick's behaviour, to be fair. He's not acting like someone who's lost a wife. Which we know because he knows he's being framed. So he knows she's not really gone. Now, as I mentioned earlier, Nick's father, Bill, has almost a non-existent role in the film. You see him briefly where he's swearing at a police detective and then gets put back in a home. In the book, he pops up a lot more, both in person and in Nick's inner monologue and in his flashbacks and everything. So Nick doesn't want to end up like his distant, unloving dad, which is why he starts to try and be a people person. So Bill is only seen once at the police station in the film, whereas Amy's parents, Rand and Mary Beth Elliott, are much smaller characters in the movie as well. So they've downplayed the parents in the movie, but in the book they're a lot bigger, as it were. And in the movie as well, in the book as well, his mum does meet Amy and quite likes Amy, whereas in the movie we get a brief thing where she's like, your mum doesn't like me, and that's it. That's, you know, Nick's mum passed away of cancer, and you get this kind of fallout from it in the book, but you don't really see it in the film. So the movie does skip Andy and Nick's breakup scene, where she bites his face in the book. Woohoo! Gotta love that. Which kind of acts as a trigger for Andy to hold the press conference and reveal their affair. Now, in the film, the press conference happens just out of nowhere. Although Tanner, as I said earlier, Tanner Bolt has told him that he needs to get ahead of this and he needs to talk to somebody and say that he's been having an affair and that he still loves his wife, because he knows that this is going to happen. He knows women spurned don't want to mess with us. Now, so you've got the whole sort of like the scene when Nick is sort of like, he goes, you know, I love you and I want you back. And that was their little code to say, I'm not lying, basically. And so in both, Amy realises that she might have made a mistake and Nick does love her after all. Nick's obviously going, I need her back here, because if she's back, I can prove that it wasn't me. So she's at this point is with Desi because she's called him for help. And she's now trying to find a way to get away from Desi and to explain her disappearance for this amount of time. So cue the poor innocent scapegoat Desi. In the book, it's not as gruesome a death for him. So she fakes her kidnapping. She wraps like twine around her wrist and, you know, pulls away, and she knows there's cameras, so she like has blood and she's like on the glass. And again, I just can't fathom what goes through that woman's mind. In the movie, she slits his throat with a box cutter and lets him bleed over her. In the book, she laces his drink She laces his martini with sleeping pills and then slashes his throat. So in the movie, they're sort of in flagrante, as it were, and she kills him and then basically bathes in his blood. In the book, it's a lot more subtle. Poor Desi, I always felt sorry for him. So you've got that, and it means that she's then covered in blood to come staggering back to her true love, Nick, and she's done it brilliantly, because obviously she staggers back to her true love, Nick, and as she comes into his arms, she collapses in the film and in the book, and they go, oh, you know, poor Amy, she's been through so much. But then the movie cuts the last tripwire of Amy writing in her diary that Nick maybe poisoned her with antifreeze. So in the book, Amy goes so far as to vomit in a box of Brussels sprouts. Yes, really, she does. And she puts them in the freezer, so she can get Nick on attempted murder charges if he turns on her. Nick, however, finds the vomit and throws it out. Good for Nick. Now, instead of writing their respective memoirs in the book, the film versions of Nick and Amy do like a television interview with like an Ellen kind of type, and Nick, it seems, is prepared to tell Ellen and the national television audience all about Amy's crimes, all about what's happened, all about the fact that nothing is right, you know, this is all fabricated. However, Amy reveals that she's pregnant, because she's used Nick's frozen sperm that we find out about earlier in the film and the book to impregnate herself. So he then hits her, you know, because he can't get out, and he stays with her. So because of that, he then doesn't reveal all. And viewers don't see the pregnancy develop in the movie. It kind of ends with him looking at the back of their head being like, what the hell am I doing with my life? Despite the fact that the book ends the day before the baby is due. So she is actually pregnant this time round, not a fake like the first time round. So within the book narrative, the drama does seem to go on longer, and there's a lot more information there, whereas the film is quicker and more fast-paced. Now, I completely understand why they've done this. It is to keep the audience completely locked in, and you don't want to get bogged down with diary entries. Now, they did change the ending, but I suppose that is because of the film. It was a good finish overall. It kind of shows that, is she lying about this new pregnancy? Is she not? But it did keep close with quite a lot of the major points, but it did change the outcome of quite a few things. So, like the killing of Desi, completely changed. And I feel like the plot overall, I'm going to give it a 6 out of 10. Now, this film is amazing. I would recommend this film. It has the right pacing, it keeps you on your toes. The fact that the author helped write the screenplay means that it did keep the same tense thriller feel to it throughout. Now, I love the storyline, and the actors brought to screen everything I loved and hated about the characters. And I would recommend this film to pretty much anyone. Now, it touches on so many subjects, like, you know, who are you in a relationship, and, you know, framing someone for murder and fake pregnancies and, you know, disillusions and everything like that. And at the end, you're still not completely sure of how you feel. Now, I mean, neither characters are good people, but and I'm sorry if you don't feel this way, but I dislike Amy so much more than I dislike Nick. They were both bad for each other, yes, but Amy went above and beyond. She froze vomit. She impregnated herself with his frozen sperm. She framed him for murder. She then went and pretended to be kidnapped and killed the person that's been looking out for her all these years. She's not right in the head, and I feel more for Nick than I do for Amy. And I've honestly always felt sorry for Nick. Obviously not completely, because he is not a very nice person, but I felt more sorry for Nick than I did for Amy. But I will give it a 9 out of 10 for the film. I would definitely recommend watching this film. Now, the book I could not put down. I loved this book, and it was recommended to me by my sister Jessica. Now, we sort of, whenever we find a good book that we recommend, I'm sure I've mentioned it before, we sort of pass it all around the 4 of us. So now all 4 of the Contento sisters have read this book, and it is a fantastic book. I'm the only sister that thinks that Amy isn't quite right in the head and sides with Nick, by the way, so I get outcast about that feeling. So I adored the build-up throughout it. And the fact that, you know, won't he be arrested? Won't she come back? And you know, it's just all of it sort of like, you're reading it as it's going and you're not realising that she's actually fabricating everything. And when you realise that she's fabricated everything, you go, oh damn. Oh damn. Like, and you sort of sit there going, oh no, she didn't. So I really liked this book. And the way the book ended as well, wanting me to see completely if it's a dysfunctional, if not toxic relationship, and they shouldn't have been together, but they were, because Nick wants to look after his child. And that was a fantastic feeling for me. Now, Gillian Flynn had me from the first chapter right up until the last, and she did not let go. And if someone is looking for a good thriller, please read this book. I will give it a 10 out of 10 for recommending the book. Now, overall, it was a close adaptation. It did miss out a lot of the women that were in the book. It did miss out sort of like a lot of the diary entries, and it changed a few of the plot points and missed a few of the back histories. And I do appreciate that all of that is overall there. It did also cut out, as I said, it cut out some strong female characters from the cast. You can't have everything from the book to the film, but I do appreciate that obviously I'm looking at how close the adaptation is from the film to the book, and I would probably give it a 7 out of 10 for me. Actually no, probably 6 out of 10. So a 6 out of 10 is the overall rating there. Now, this is my own opinion. Of course, I'm happy if you disagree with anything. Leave it below in the comments. Don't forget to click subscribe and like this video as well. And I will be back next week on the Contented Narrative for Matilda, which is a nice light-hearted one after Gone Girl. So until then, remember to always keep it contento.